The name Devin Townsend needs little introduction to the average metalhead today. Most will have come across him at some point over his 25-year career, whether it be singing for legendary guitar virtuoso Steve Vai, a stint with English rockers The Wildhearts, leading his pioneering extreme metal act Strapping Young Lad, or for his multiple solo incarnations which have ultimately positioned him as one of metal's most prominent and prolific artists. And while the majority of Townsend's output has been universally lauded for its consistent, exceptional quality, there is one album that fans and Townsend himself often cite as the lowest point in his career, and that is his 2000 solo release, Physicist. Marred by a claustrophobic mix, somewhat directionless songs, and even described by Townsend himself as terrible, today we ask, what the fuck happened to this album? The story of Physicist begins in California in 1994 at a place called Chop House Studios, founded and run by then Metallica bassist Jason Newsted as a place for musicians to play and record raw and uninterrupted music. It was Exodus drummer Tom Hunting who brought Townsend to the Chop House, and after what Tevin would later describe as a weekend jam session with Newsted, a 3-song demo tape was created with the title Irate. The 3 tracks pack hard industrial metal grooves with a commanding guttural style of vocal from Newsted. The demo would lead to nothing more, as would another fabled unreleased demo from another Newsted and Townsend project, Tree of the Sun, featuring Scott Reeder of Caius and the Melvins Dale Crover, which has never even been publicly released. However, the pair weren't done working together and were still planning another project, this time one they deemed to be more extreme than SYL, with the working title of Physicist. Ultimately though, they would each have different views as to what they wanted to achieve of Physicist, and speaking with UltimateGuitar.com in 2014, Townsend would have this to say: "I came down full of piss and vinegar saying, look, I've been writing this music, we've been hanging out, let's do this. And I think he was just like, whoa dude, that's not my next move, man. And rightfully so. But at the time I was bummed. I'm like, alright, well I'm gonna do it myself." There is, however, another reason as to why Townsend and Newsted ultimately departed ways. And it's at this point where one of the main issues in Townsend's career becomes clear, and that was his heavy use of illicit drugs. Townsend has said after the release and success of City, he made a conscious decision to get heavy into psychedelic drugs, a decision which ultimately landed him in a psychiatric institution with the diagnosis of bipolar disorder by the end of 1997. In the end, this use of psychedelics is what would sever his relationship with Jason Newsted. In an interview with Argentina's Bangers magazine in 2010, Townsend recalled the last time they spoke as being at Newsted's house and dropping acid together. He told of the experience. "I tripped pretty hard and started acting pretty strange with him. I think I freaked him out pretty hard. It was really fucking weird. For several years he was in my life, and then overnight, I never heard from him again. I hope he's well." This prolonged drug use would lend heavily to the critically acclaimed bombastic solo release Infinity in 1998, which Townsend recalls as having an element of romance to, but one that he can't rationalise anymore. Following on from the success of Infinity, Townsend felt an overwhelming desire to re-enter the studio and begin work on the material written for Physicist. His prolonged heavy drug use during this period, however, left him with a heightened sense of self-importance that eventually resulted in him having what he describes as a colossal personal meltdown. He felt his actions and decisions during this period had left him in a place that he wasn't sure how to bounce back from. Feeling that, in hindsight, the music he made with SYL had been mentally unhealthy, Townsend decided to include his SYL bandmates in the recording of this new material. Though he felt they were simply waiting for him to work through this existential crisis and get back on the road with Strapping, he would later state that he did this because he didn't know how to break up the relationship with them, and that he thought it was a way to passively get away with it, although it was not to be. He had a vision for the new album, now with the title Physicist, and that it was a pop-flavoured metal album that took cues from Def Leppard type sheen and applied it to bleak, futuristic and cold music. To achieve this, he looked away from metal and turned to Canadian rock producer Mike Plotnikoff. At the time, Plotnikoff had just finished the mixing for albums from The Cranberries and Yes, a far cry from the extreme industrial tinged metal Devin Townsend was about to provide him with. And while Townsend felt that Plotnikoff had worked on some great sounding records, he felt his own engineering skills were lacking, and the sounds he presented to Plotnikoff were, in his own words, shit. It was these underdeveloped production skills, coupled with Plotnikoff's techniques, that resulted in what Townsend described as a din, underproduced white noise that he was never satisfied with. It's clear that the mix on Physicist is the album's biggest issue. There's no doubt that Plotnikoff is a fine engineer, and while he may ultimately never been the right choice for Devin's sonically dense style and vision, it would be unfair to blame him for the entire outcome. Devin has stated several times that he was depressed during the recording of the record, and producing the album himself while in such a state was probably never going to achieve the best results. The resulting album sounds like sort of a halfway house between the aggression of City, mixed with the emotive thump of what Townsend would go on to do in the next few years with the Devin Townsend Band. Townsend had described the sound as SYL Light, which is a curious statement given several of these songs could easily stand beside anything from City. And when looking back now, the term SYL Light would possibly be more aptly applied to the final SYL album, The New Black, which generally gets nowhere close to the speed, aggression and intensity of what's on display on Physicist. Townsend has been quite vocal about his disdain for the album, referring to it as a terrible and gross sounding record. Although it was this comment to ultimateguitar.com though that really cuts to the bone as to why he looks so unfavourably on the record. The main thing I'm not proud of is the fact that I phoned it in at the end and the record sounds unlike the vision. For several years after the release of Physicist, Townsend has stated that he would like to return to some of the material, and finally in 2012 he re-recorded Kingdom for the Devin Townsend project release Epic Cloud, and again returned to material for their 2016 release Transcendence, this time with a re-recording of Victim. Whether we'll see any more re-recordings will remain to be seen. With an artist as prolific and unpredictable as Devin Townsend, nothing is ever impossible.